Good evening. I hope you enjoyed our dinner this evening. Chef Mo did an awesome job. The Moroccan chicken was incredible, the roasted vegetables, everything. Well, tonight is a special night. Besides our 25th anniversary celebration, we're also starting a new award. It's called the Peacebuilder Award. The Plowshare Peacebuilder Award is an opportunity for us to recognize individuals and groups from southeastern Wisconsin who have made a contribution to peace, nonviolent solutions to conflict, and/or social justice by enhancing understanding and cooperation among people from diverse ethnic, religious, racial, or socioeconomic backgrounds. So many dedicated individuals and groups are steadfast in their peace-building work. Our goal is to lift them up as inspirational role models. Tonight, we will honor the first recipients of this annual award, and this award will be given each year in honor of Kate Delaney Jolin. Kate, would you please join me up here? Okay. Kate, you and Alice had the dream of creating a better world, starting right here in Waukesha. You shared your dream with others, and they got excited. The 8 founders made that dream a reality, and over the past quarter century, you have inspired countless others to share the vision of making peace relevant to the world around us. Your leadership in educational outreach has resulted in an amazing array of programs in our community on issues of peace and social justice. You, Kate, are the ultimate peace builder. You are a valued mentor and role model. Kate, you have been one of the most important people in my adult life, and I know many others gathered here this evening would echo that statement. We have something for you. It's a beautiful heart, because, Kate, you are the heart of Plowshare.
My heart is overflowing with gratitude. This is a total and complete surprise. Thank you so much to Plowshare. And you know, I was just thinking, because of Plowshare, I've been able to lead a much larger life than I would have otherwise, I'm sure. You know, just being around people who care so much about the community and care so much about the world is just totally inspiring. And I was also thinking of Alice Walker, you know, the author of The Color Purple and the social activist. When she was asked about her activism, she said, "My activism is the rent I pay for living on this planet." And I want to thank Plowshare for giving me a chance to pay at least part of my rent for living on this beautiful blue-green planet. Thank you so much, Sally.
I've been so excited about having this surprise for Kate. Well, tonight, as I said, we are lifting up role models in peace building. And Laralyn Carpenter, would you please come forward? Oh, here she comes. Okay. Through the International AFS program, Laralyn Carpenter has hosted 21 foreign students over the past 24 years. The students have come from 3 continents and been of many faiths, including Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians. Larilyn has also served as an escort to adoptive families in international adoptions. Her most recent escort trips were to Russia and Romania. Larilyn, in recognition of your faithful peace-building work, the Plowshare Center is pleased to present you with this certificate of appreciation. Another amazing role model is Dr. Deirdre Keenan. Deirdre isn't able to join us here tonight, but I want to tell you all about her. For more than 2 decades, Deirdre has led Carroll University students in new cultural encounters, both within the classroom and on very carefully designed trips. She has taught post-colonial literature and African-American literature. Under her tutelage, students are able to see the values offered by the developing world and how those values can broaden our perspective and help move the world toward understanding and peace. She has taken students on numerous trips, immersing them in Native American culture and leading them to understand profoundly the consequence of social injustice and how we move from there to social justice and meaningful peace. She is also the co-chair of the United Nations Association Film Festival. And we honor Deirdre with the Kate Delaney Jolin Peacebuilder Award. In recognition of her faithful peace-building work, the Plowshare Center is pleased to present her with the Certificate of Appreciation. I'll be seeing Deirdre this week and presenting it to her. Can we have a round of applause for Deirdre? The first recipient of the Kate Delaney Jolin Peacebuilder Award are Bud and Sarah Hudson. Bud and Sarah exude peace and justice. 25 years ago, a partnership was formed between the Rose Glen Elementary School in Waukesha, where Sarah taught, and La Escuela Flavia Rodas Noriega in Chichicastenango, Guatemala, a community they fell in love with when Bud was doing research in Guatemala. The partnership was initiated to enhance an awareness and appreciation of one another's cultures. Many cultural exchanges have taken place through student projects and school visitations. Sarah and Bud have led groups of educators to Chichi in the summer. Projects have included painting the school, putting in a concrete playground, adding bathrooms, building a library. Bud and Sarah have also facilitated groups of educators from Chichi to be our guests in Waukesha during the school year for a very rich cultural exchange with Rose Glen students and their families. Sarah has been retired for many years, but the Rose Glen Chichi partnership continues. This is her legacy. Susan Ailson and Kathy Hernandez have taken over the leadership of the group, and a group of Rose Glen teachers, parents, and students will go to Chichi again this summer. And the spin-offs of this partnership in Chichicastenango have been amazing. There have been mission trips from Southminster Presbyterian Church and Marquette University engineering students and Engineers Without Borders have worked to build bridges and water systems in Guatemala. The ripple effect of this partnership continues. Sarah and Bud moved from Waukesha to the Hartford area several years ago, where they became active and peace seekers of Washington County. Wherever they live, they are peace builders. Bud and Sarah, the Plowshare Center is pleased to present you with the 2014 Kate Delaney Jolin Peacebuilder Award. Absolutely.
What an incredible group here. I taught at Carroll for 30 years, and the typical lecture hour was 50 minutes. But I assure you, I'm not going to talk that long. Okay. It's an honor to be here with all of you celebrating the 25th anniversary of Plowshare and to be the first recipients of the Peacebuilder Award. We accept this award in recognition of all of you and many others who are working for peace in a variety of different ways. Please know our admiration of and appreciation for all that you do. Allow me to share a few special words of gratitude. First, and I think I speak for all of us, to Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, for their continued inspiration and motivation to seek peace. Secondly, to Carroll College. To Carroll University. When I taught here, it was Carroll College. As soon as I left, it became a university. Don't draw any conclusions from that. Thank Carroll University for the major impact in my life and the life of my family. In 1975, Carroll enhanced their global education with NCEP, New Cultural Experiences Program. Through NCEP, I was able to develop and implement programs with colleagues, students, and area citizens to Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico, Kenya, and Nepal. Challenging, enriching, and rewarding for all. When Sally said that we were going to receive this award, she said, oh, let's be perfectly clear. It's not for things that you have done. It's for things that follow what you have done. So let's think of it in this way. It's not for what we've done, it's for things that are to be done after we're done. Spin-offs. Several of these programs have had notable spin-offs, which is the thrust of the Peacebuilder Award, and you've already heard from Sally on some of them. Let me note several. David Block, if he's here, would he please raise his right hand? Okay, he's way back there. Retired professor of geography at Carroll, he continued the Kenya program as I was approaching retirement and has made an incredible commitment to Kenya, especially the rural village of Ribe. He has coordinated, in conjunction with Alan Katama, a 2000 Carroll alum from Kenya, from Ribe, Kenya, wonderful partnerships between Ribe and Carroll, his family and his church with water, electrical, educational, and medical projects. Quite an array. And we, by the way, should congratulate David on being this year's recipient of the Carroll University Alumnus Community Service Award. Congratulations, David. That's an example of one spinoff, and it will continue. Incredible. Another spinoff, Bridie Hill Hernandez, Carroll grad who went to Kenya in 1998, started a nonprofit called Project Kenya, now called Speak Kenya, involving multiple trips in education, health, water, and sanitation projects. Graduated in '99, started this program in roughly 2006, and has been to Kenya probably 25 times already with a number of different groups coordinated. And a last noted spinoff, Anita Martin, Bethesda elementary teacher and friend, had us initiate a partnership between her school, Bethesda, and Mbauru Primary School in Wundanya, Kenya, which she continues to support. Much respect and admiration for the wonderful commitment of these three and those they have impacted, and clearly many more. My third expression of gratitude is to the Peace Seekers of Washington County, already noted by Sally, and our Hartford Friends of the Library ESL program. Both have provided opportunities for us to be active in programs seeking peace in a variety of ways. And lastly, thank you, Sarah. Are you listening, David Block? Thank you for the wonderful love, support, and inspiration to pursue these various experiences. And to all of you, thanks. Gracias. Asante sana. And now Sarah would like to make just a few comments. Thank you.
I also want to thank all of you at Plowshare for what a wonderful event this is tonight and a wonderful honor to be receiving this award. As Bud said, we receive it or we accept it from all of you who have also been so involved. Congratulations also on your 25th anniversary. What a celebration tonight. Now, I didn't really realize that Sally knew as much about us and the partnership as she seems to know, although she went with us in '95, so I guess I could have surmised that. Anyway, I would like to give just a little bit of background in the back, before it kind of got out into the open. I wish to thank my wonderful husband, Bud, also, for saying yes to Roy Christoph. I don't know if any of you know him, remember him. In 1974, he asked Bud if he would be the on-site director for the NCEP program in Guatemala. And of course, Bud came home and asked us around the kitchen table if that would be okay with us. And we said, sure. For how long? He said, well, for a month, and it would be in January. Well, okay, we said. So he did. He went, and because he said yes, we went to Guatemala then later for a 7-month sabbatical, and our whole family fell in love with its people and culture, and Guatemala became our second home. 10 years later, Anita Martin, friend and PTA president at Randall, asked me if I knew where and how Randall students could become involved with another culture. We were at a Peace Mission Committee meeting that night, by the way, at Southminster. And I said, that's a great idea, and I know our school, Rose Glen, would really like to do that too, so let's make a Randall-Rose Glen partnership with some other place. Well, we had friends in Guatemala at that point, in Chichi. They were missionaries. And we called Jody and Steve Hammer and asked them if they knew of any school in Chichicastenango where we might have a partnership. And Jody said, yes, we do know, and I'll go and ask Oscar Giron, who is the principal. So she went over and she said that we were interested in having a partnership, and would he like to do that? And he said, con mucho gusto, sí. And so the partnership began. It was born in 1988, and each one of the classes at Rose Glen and Randall sent laminated valentines to Guatemala. We also sent markers and paper because we weren't sure that this school had the supplies. They then returned valentines to us by the end of May, and they don't have a laminator, so they had wax paper on both sides of them. It was really very cute. In 1991, our first visit to Guatemala, and we had 27 in that group. It included a principal, teachers, parents, students, and families from Southminster Presbyterian Church. 10 wonderful days of homestays with teachers and a cultural assembly and various projects, which included, like Sally mentioned, building a playground and painting the school, etc., and many wonderful spin-offs by participants from this first trip. And Bud gave you the spin-offs for Kenya, and I'd like to just give a few spin-offs from Guatemala. Jan and Carl Wella started the Southminster Presbyterian Youth Mission trips to Guatemala to build schools and work on projects at Flavia Rodas. This continues every 3 years, even now, and they were on that first trip. All of these people I'm mentioning were on that first trip in 1991. The Wellas also developed visits to Flavia Rodas with Spanish class students from North High School who related to evening secondary school students at Flavia Rodas. It's interesting, that school is a public school. In the morning it has 800 students, in the afternoon it has about 400 students, and at night it has maybe, I don't know, Carl, 100, 200? I'm not sure in the evening class. But much less. As the kids get older, they drop out of school to do other things. Shirley and Paul Johnson have led groups from Southminster and Marquette University to build over 25 bridges and water projects. Nancy Marshall also went on that trip with us, and she's inspired her church to build a church and promote medical missions in Guatemala. We've had just recently a partnership with La Casa de Esperanza, and they invited 7 to 9 people, I can't remember, from Chichi to share the culture of Guatemala at the fiesta. That was 2 years ago. When there were things left over that they didn't sell, Plowshare has accepted a lot of those things and are selling those things in their store, which has been wonderful for the people who made those things. Then the last thing, 12 years later, after 91, that would have been in 03, Sherry Beal Weezer, a friend of mine who taught first grade with me, started her own personal partnership with Guatemala by adopting a little baby, Marissa. And I was very fortunate to go down with Sherry to bring Marissa home. Very special. So groups from Rose Glen have gone down every 5 years, and from Flavia Rodas have come up every 5 years, and the teachers at Rose Glen and the students have done all sorts of wonderful welcoming and sharing of our culture. They've shared their culture. Even the first assembly, we had fireworks in the assembly because they were sharing their culture. And of course, nobody knew about that till it happened. It was those were the days when airplanes would, let you carry whatever you wanted to on the plane. So they brought up fireworks. Projects down there have been, building bathrooms, hand washing stations, and a library, all paid for by selling Guatemalan items that we buy in the market when we're down there, supporting the artisans. And then we bring them up here, mark them up quite a bit actually, so that the students and the parents can know a little bit about that culture, and they love those things, and then that money goes back to the Guatemalans to bring them up the next time they're coming, or to a project like what I've mentioned. So it's been a really wonderful exchange. Groups from Rose Glen, I already said that. Projects, let's see. As we speak, this is the big finale here. Susan Wall-Ailson and Kathy Hernandez are planning the 6th group trip down this summer. They'll leave around the 20th of June and be back the 2nd of July. And if any of you are interested, you can still sign up before March 31st. So if any of you are interested, think it over carefully. We have been blessed, Bud and I, and all of the partnership people, by many dedicated people who have said yes. Also who have fallen in love with Guatemala and its culture and have continued this wonderful partnership and all of its spin-offs. So thank you very much. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. I'll give Sarah the box. You're welcome. Besides an individual award for the Peacebuilder Award, we're also going to each year be honoring an organization. This year, that honor goes to Sophia. Sophia, Stewards of Prophetic, Hopeful, Intentional Action, is a congregation-based community organizing coalition that seeks to put their values into action by promoting concrete issues of social justice. They gather people of many faith backgrounds to learn about issues, to strategize ways to make a difference, and to act effectively to change systems that perpetuate injustice and inequality. Over the past decade, this organization has had great success in influencing local and county policies regarding treatment of immigrations, housing for middle and low-income people, and alternatives to incarceration. Sophia has worked with 10 sister organizations throughout Wisconsin to effectively change state public policies. A statewide campaign currently underway that Sophia members are actively engaged in is the 11 by 15 campaign, working to reduce our state prison population to 11,000 by the year 2015. It has been a call to Wisconsin legislators to allocate funds for community-based programs addressing addiction and mental illness through effective rehabilitation and treatment programs, and calling for changes in unjust sentencing legislation and policies. Would Betty Grunwald please come forward? Betty is the current president of Sophia. Betty, the Plowshare Center is pleased to award the first annual Kate Delaney Jolin Peacebuilder Group Award to Sophia.
On behalf of Sophia, we are honored to receive this award. Clearly, the Plowshare Center has paved the way for the work that we do at this stage in our lives and in our community. And it always amazes me how effective small groups of people can be by becoming educated, aware, and to speak out for injustices. Thank you very much.
Here's a box for you, Betty. And now Kate is going to introduce our keynote speaker.
Well, I'm so pleased and really honored to introduce our speaker for tonight. Dr. Margaret Rozga, as probably all of you know, is a University of Wisconsin Waukesha Professor of English Emerita and an author and poet in her own right. Her writing includes 200 Nights and One Day, the story of the year-long Milwaukee Fair Housing Campaign, and another book, Though I Haven't Been to Baghdad, reflecting on her experience as the mother of an Army reservist deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's so wonderful to have one of our own give the keynote address tonight. Margaret is a former Plowshare board member and a longtime social justice and peace advocate. She's an inspiration for Plowshare to continue persevering for peace beyond these 25 years. Starting way back in 1965, Margaret was part of an organized effort to organize voters in Alabama, to register voters in Alabama. Then in August 1967, as a recent graduate from Alverno College, Margaret was one of the NAACP Youth Council members led by Father James Grappi, who courageously walked across the Milwaukee's 16th Street Viaduct to the virtually all-white South Side. Margaret lived the story of the Milwaukee Open Housing Campaign. In her book, 200 Nights and One Day, she says, having lived this history means continuing to live it. It is always there, part and parcel of who we are. As someone who is continuing to work for social justice, former advisor to the Students for Peace group at UWW, and also going to lead the Freedom Ride, retracing America's journey to equality and justice this summer, Margaret is a model for a new generation. She is still persevering for peace after 50 years. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Margaret Rozga as she speaks on bending towards justice and peace.
Thank you, Kate. And congratulations to the Plowshare Center for your terrific accomplishment of Persevering for Peace these 25 years. Your long-term witness, the long-term presence in this community is precisely what helps to ensure that peace, as a lifelong way of being in the world as well as a goal for the world, is woven deeply into our community culture. Your work for peace has required you sometimes to give up other things you might do. For your generosity in making those sacrifices and for the clarity of your vision, I want to thank you. And I want to thank you too for the honor of being in this position of keynote speaker for this event. I would be here anyway. Being here to present some thoughts about persevering for peace and engage in the 25th anniversary discussion with you gives me great pleasure and makes me feel both proud and humble at the same time. I feel a profound sense of gratitude, privilege, and responsibility to find words to match this occasion. As a poet, I like to think that poetry is one way to approach that task. So I'd like to begin with a poem, this one not my own, a poem by Jane Hirschfeld called Optimism. I think you'll hear right away in the first line why I think this poem is appropriate for tonight. Optimism. More and more, I have come to admire resilience. Not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree. Finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another. A blind intelligence, true, but out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs, and all this resonance, unretractable earth. I might add to Jane Hirschfeld's list of what arose from persistence, but let me just modify the kind of persistence we're talking about. I think we're talking about persistence that's fully alert and awake. And out of such persistence, out of the ongoing persistence of advocates for peace, wars end. Out of the persistence of peace advocates, we find creative solutions to conflict and avoid violence. Out of such persistence arises this marvelous organization and this memorable evening. I want to say as well a very personal thank you to the Plowshare Center and to all its members and supporters and board members. 10 years ago, the Plowshare Center was an amazing source of strength for me personally. At that time, my son, who was an Army reservist then, was deployed to Iraq. This sense I had of his being in danger and the horror of war left me in jitters, left me unable to finish sentences, left me even unable to talk about what was most on my mind in the first person. So I began to write about it in terms of the mother and the son. The son parks his pickup in the mother's garage, stays only long enough to. She turns the pancakes, warms maple. He leaves his fishing rods in the basement, tagged with the names of friends in case he doesn't. When he walks through the garage into the falling sun, the mother wonders, will she ever? Will he? So I thought, as I was trying to deal with this situation, if my son is being sent to fight a war, I have to do something for peace. But where and what? I had friends who were active in the Peace Action Center in Milwaukee, but I didn't want to spend the time I had for volunteering driving back and forth to Milwaukee. I wanted to do something here. What was there here that fit the bill? The Plowshare Center. So that is how and when I stepped up my activity. I became a Plowshare board member and found some balance, some voice. I'd like to thank the Plowshare Center as well for the way that you serve the larger community. Educational programs always seem to be timed to meet the need. I remember recently wondering what was going on in Syria. The news reports seemed confusing. I was looking for some source of information, and Plowshare offered a program. So I was able to get information on the various factions in Syria and some of the history of the conflict. But there was also something more that happened that afternoon at that talk. The speaker was a doctor in our community. So the Plowshare Education Committee, drawing on its network of contacts, also implicitly made the point that our community is full of resourceful people who can help us understand issues. All we have to do is look for them, look among our friends, our colleagues, our acquaintances. We are better for this network of people and the resources than we would be without it, and Plowshare has a way of centering that network of resources and people. Of course, the Fair Trade Store also serves the community in multiple ways, provides a source of beautiful things for us in our homes and for us to give as gifts on special occasions. It introduces the concept of fair trade to the community. That is, trade which is not exploitative, which makes sure that the people producing the goods make a fair wage, fair living. And because many of the products are made from recycled materials with an eye toward being environmentally sound, it also provides a model of work that is environmentally sensitive. I used to bring my students from UW-Waukesha to the Plowshare store in the fall when we have a program called Immersion Excursions. And that was one thing that they were always very grateful for, that they now knew a place where they could get things that were not only providing compensation to the people who made them, but were made with consciousness of the scarce resources of the earth. And of course, the store provides a market for craftspersons and organizations throughout the world. The Plowshare Center is also an important presence in the community that lacks an official community relations committee or official program of community relations. I remember when I was on the board, there was a case of a family, a Southeast Asian family, maybe Hmong, tailors in the family, and they tried to rent a shop where they could do their tailoring. And they were turned down quite clearly because of their ethnic background. And they didn't know where to turn for help. They asked several people, and as it happened, almost everybody they asked said, "Why don't you go talk to the people at the Plowshare Center? They will listen to you, they will care." And we did. So congratulations and thank you for all the ways your presence in the community makes a difference in bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice and peace. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Martin Luther King spoke these words 49 years ago, almost to the day. It was March 25th, 1965, on the steps of the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. after the long march for voting rights from Selma, after the beatings of the marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma some weeks earlier, Bloody Sunday, March 7th, 1965, after a multi-year, actually a decade-long struggle by African Americans in Dallas County to get the right to vote, and after almost 100 years since the ratification of the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which forbids the denial of the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Given that historical perspective, yes, obviously, Martin Luther King could see, as we do, that the arc of the moral universe is long indeed. But his confident assertion that it bends toward justice bolsters and validates the struggle and those who are active in the struggle, those who may be discouraged. It is a statement of faith in the ultimate and inevitable triumph of justice, and then with justice we can achieve peace. That sense of inevitability, that sense of being on the right side of history is one of the factors, I think, that helps sustain our efforts, helps us persevere for peace. And even if you believe in the ultimate realization of justice and peace, it is not going to happen on an automatic timeline. That timeline is not yet written. It can be longer, or we can do things to shorten it. It takes work, effort, and perseverance and effort to bend the arc and bolster the movement toward justice and peace, and to hasten its coming. So the sense that our efforts are needed to make a difference is another important factor in persevering for peace, because if we don't do it, who will? A third factor that helps us persevere is seeing need, witnessing injustice. Albert Camus, in his book, The Rebel, talks about the fact that people will sometimes put up with for themselves what they will not tolerate seeing done to another. So he comes to the conclusion that saying no, standing up for peace and justice is a community building enterprise. In his words, I rebel, therefore we exist. I think this is true in my own experience and history of being involved in social justice movements. I can remember as far back as 1957, I was in grade school watching TV one night and seeing the soldiers from the 101st Airborne being sent by President Eisenhower to escort school children in Little Rock, Arkansas, to school when the school was being desegregated and there was fierce opposition to their presence in the school. I can remember watching in 1960 the sit-ins beginning in Greensboro, North Carolina, for college students sitting in at the Woolworths. And I began to think about what was going on. And it complicated my own trips downtown Milwaukee to the Woolworth store. As I was walking through and looking at trinkets, I was thinking, there are people walking through a store like this who cannot sit down at its lunch counter without triggering a violent reaction. So it caused me to be more concerned about these issues. Then there were the demonstrations in Birmingham with dogs attacking demonstrators, the searching for the bodies of James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman in Mississippi in June 1964. And then probably most of all, the event that had an impact on me and moved me from being concerned to wanting to take action, watching Fannie Lou Hamer testify at the 1964 Democratic Convention about being kicked off of the plantation where she had been working most of her adult life, where her house was. all because she tried to register to vote, of being pulled off of a bus after coming back from a leadership workshop, arrested, jailed, beaten, all because she tried to register to vote. And I wondered, what is this? Why are people being denied the right to vote? Isn't this America? And I knew then, watching her face, impassioned, speaking on TV, that I had to do something. That spring, the spring of 1965, of course, was the Selma to Montgomery March. And while I didn't go on that, I was at a talk that some of the students who went gave at Alverno College, where I was a student. And they were not only talking about the march and their experience in the South, they were also recruiting for a summer program, summer community organization and political education project sponsored by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, Dr. King's organization. And here I had been looking for what I could do, and here they came with an answer. So I volunteered and spent the summer in Bullock County, Alabama, about 50 miles southeast of Montgomery. A fourth factor that helps us persevere for justice and peace is gaining historical perspective, that backward glance by which we can see, oh, things have changed. Oh, my efforts have made a difference. Oh, we are making some progress here. It's the reason why celebrations like this one are so important. And in the South, having the opportunity to go back now some 48 years after I was a voting rights volunteer, there has been an opportunity for me to see some of the changes. Actually, I've been on civil rights tours to the South probably 4 or 5 times already. But when I first went, I went without much perspective. I thought the problems of racism in this country would be solved, well, maybe not that summer, but within a year or two. Quickly learned that the problems were much deeper. The first registration day, Bullock County and Alabama at the time had 2 registration days per month. And we were in the county almost 3 weeks before the first registration day. So we had spent 3 weeks going from house to house in this rural county, talking to people about registering to vote, trying to encourage them, trying to tell them that we'd be with them, there was nothing to be afraid of. We'd be supporting them. And we thought we had maybe somewhere close to 100 people who said they would come. Well, what happened that first registration day is about 40 actually showed up, and slightly over half of them actually were permitted to register and get on the voter registration rolls. We had been expecting a lot more, a lot faster, and we're disappointed to the point of tears, of actually crying. And then that evening we got together with some of the local leaders who hadn't been at the courthouse that day, and they were just ecstatic. 20 people, 22 people, was almost as many people, African Americans, as were registered to vote in the county at that point. So we had doubled the number of registered African Americans in that county. They had never had such a wonderful turnout. It was far better than they expected. And so we began to measure things a little bit differently with that historical perspective in mind. We also learned that the work that we were doing was dangerous. Most evenings, we had meetings in small African American churches throughout the county. And after the meeting, we would drive back to the house where we were staying. The Daniels house was out on Antioch Church Road, just a little bit beyond beautiful downtown Midway, Alabama. population 500. Actually, there was no downtown Midway. There were a couple of abandoned buildings. It had once been a cotton processing center, and there were a couple of buildings that had been used for that purpose. They were vacant at the time. They were in fairly good condition for buildings that had been standing vacant for a long time. White teenagers would hang out around there, and so when we would be driving home, we'd drive past there, and they would get in their cars and follow us down the highway. The rule at the time was never let anybody pass you on the highway at night, the rule for civil rights workers. And the reason for that rule was that was how Viola Liuzzo was killed after the Selma to Montgomery March. Somebody pulled as if to pass her, forced her off the road, and then she was at their mercy, and they had no mercy. So you were never supposed to let anybody pass you on the road. I would drive this 59 Chevy as fast as it would go, which was about 80 miles an hour down this winding, dark, rural highway. And I'd have to count the curves in the road. First curve, second curve, third curve, slam on the brakes, turn in the Daniels driveway. If I had missed their driveway, I would have had to keep on going until Florida. There was no other place to stop. You know, and maybe those teenagers meant us no harm. Maybe they were just bored, not too much to do in a rural county. But we were terrified. Who knows what might have happened if they had actually gotten into a confrontation with us. So there was a point at which I thought I wasn't going to live to be 30. So I'm really glad to be here tonight. The changes that occurred in the rural South, throughout the South, immediately after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, which happened later that summer, signed into law by President Johnson, August 6, 1965, were immediate. All the petty harassment at the courthouse stopped, even though there were no registrars in our county. All of the, you're not standing in line correctly. If you're going to be having such a wiggle-woggle line, you'll have to leave. All the, oh, I'm sorry, we ran out of application forms. All the 2-hour lunches stopped August 7th. And people registered and were processed and became voters. The next spring, the spring of 1966, African-American candidates for 6 different local elections came in the primary first. That's how quickly the scene changed. Now, I'm not sure that those candidates won the general election. The votes that had been dispersed among numerous candidates tend to be solidified for the white candidate who then won. But by 1967, there was an African-American sheriff in Bullock County, Alabama. So the changes were quick, immediate, and became African-Americans gained their rights to participate in government. Having gone back subsequently, I've seen other changes, some of them sort of mixed. The sharecropping economy that was typical in the county at the time is there no longer. It is corporate and mechanized farming. All of the 1- and 2-room cabins where the African Americans lived, much like African Americans lived in slave times in the quarters, all of those are torn down. But some things that people have better housing is certainly an improvement. I don't know about corporate farming, but some things are clearly better. One of the local leaders who invited us to Bullock County, Mr. Thomas, had at the time we were there a small store with a couple of gasoline pumps in front of it on a dirt road, kind of what seemed to me way back in the woods. When we went back, the road was paved, his store was expanded, and he had grown as a business person. He was now raising catfish in a pond on his farm, much better economic situation than had been previous. Probably the biggest positive change that I was aware of was the change in the Atlanta airport. In 1965, I went home for my sister's wedding partway through the summer, and another volunteer, Barbara, and the son of the people we were staying with, Fred Daniels, drove me to the airport in Atlanta, Fred being African American, Barbara and I white. We're the subject of some pretty hostile staring and pointing and rude remarks when we walk through the Atlanta airport. Well, nothing like that happens in the Atlanta airport today. It's a major international terminal with people every color walking through it. And I sometimes think, you know, we did American business a real favor. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to segregate a waiting room in an international terminal? Another thing that I think helps us persevere for peace is seeing how the energy that we put forth is really never lost. One action inspires another action. We see this with the African American Civil Rights Movement, which inspired multiple movements throughout the U.S., movements among Latinos, indigenous people, students, women, LGBT movements, peace movements, northern civil rights movements, all draw inspiration and strength from the Southern Civil Rights Movement, even when the Southern Civil Rights Movement may have doubted itself. I went back to do research at the Martin Luther King Center, and all of the tapes from the training sessions that had been conducted when I was a volunteer, all the training sessions had been taped, and I could listen to the tapes. And one of the things that came through over and over again in the planning meetings was how this project, this 1965 project, was not going to be a failure like the 1964 project. And as I read that, it just totally stopped me. They really thought in 1965 that the 1964, what's now called Freedom Summer, was a failure. If there had been no Freedom Summer, there may have been no voting rights bill. There may have been no Congressman John Lewis or John Conyers, no Mayor Andrew Young of Atlanta and a vision of Olympic Games in Atlanta. There may have been no Ambassador Andrew Young, Ambassador to the United Nations in the Carter administration, who tells a story of coming out of a New York hotel when he was ambassador to the United Nations, and somebody else on the street walks up to him and hands him the keys to his car, to this other person's car, thinking he's the valet. And that we see it as absurd or laughable or even just an error today, I think says a lot about how far we've come. Milwaukee and Northern civil rights movements were also inspired by the Southern civil rights movement. In Milwaukee, looking back at what was successful and what wasn't, offers another perspective. When I first came into the Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council, the issue was, well, first it was the whites-only membership clause in the Eagles Club, and then gradually the attention shifted to public officials who belonged to the segregated Eagles Club, who claimed to be impartial on the bench if they were a judge or in the office if they had a different position, claimed to be impartial in their public life, but were members of a segregated club in their private life. You know, we never really won that issue. The most the Eagles Club did was to change from a national exclusionary clause to a local option for an exclusionary clause. And at the time, the public officials, one judge resigned from the Eagles Club when we raised the issue. Everybody else, and virtually every politician in Milwaukee belonged. It was a quasi-public institution. You could leave your nomination papers on the desk, and when people would come to work out, they would sign your nomination papers, made running for office a lot easier. Virtually everyone, every politician in Milwaukee belonged, and they continued to belong. And yet, somehow something happened, because today there's not a politician in this country, not the worst of them, who would dare belong to a club with an official policy of whites only. So sometimes even when you lose, you win. I think we see this happening right now with marriage equality. Just a few years ago, there was this wave of legislation and constitutional amendments to define marriage as between one man and one woman. And then something happened, and the tide is turning. And I like to think that the energy that people put forth in raising that issue and standing up for it, even though they seem to be losing, that energy was not lost. And it didn't work on their timetable, but it did have an effect. Fair housing issue in Milwaukee was also a multi-year effort. Mayor Frank Zeidler in the 1950s would have liked to have seen such a thing happen. As it was, he went for public housing when he saw the hostility to the growing African-American population. African-American population in Milwaukee tripled between 1950 and 1960, from about 21,000 to almost 62,000. So there's tremendous growth in the population and not a corresponding growth in the housing stock available to them. Val Phillips, the first African-American and the first woman on the Milwaukee Common Council, ran with the intention of proposing fair housing, and she did so first in 1962. Between 1962 and 1967, she introduced that ordinance 3 more times, and every time she was the only person to vote for it. So it looked like loser, 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 loser. The Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council asked her if she wanted some help in working for passage of this law, and she said yes. We first picketed at the homes of aldermen, and they were all men, who had African-American constituents but were voting against the law. She brought the bill up again, and they still voted it down. So we had to escalate the campaign, and that's when the marches across the viaduct occurred. The first march across the viaduct, there were maybe 200 people in favor of fair housing. And when we got to the south end of the viaduct, we found 8,000 counter demonstrators waiting for us. 200 nights of marching didn't seem to be producing any results. And we reached a point at which we felt like losers. We felt like losers. March 19th, 1968, the 200th night of marching. Where? Who? What? When? For 200 nights, the Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council, on the bridge, in the jails, at the city limits, in Seraphim's Court. What will it take? How in our life? After 200 nights, the Milwaukee Youth Council, momentum gone, money gone. What will it take? How in our life? How closed their minds? How hard their hearts? Momentum gone, money gone, wondering what future, what next month, what closed the minds, what hardened their hearts, what to say when it's not over, but it ends. Wondering what future, what tomorrow, how to bridge such injustice, counter such limits, what to say to move the mayor, to upend denial. What? Who? Where? When? On that 200th night of marching, there was no way that we could know that within a month, fair housing would be the law of the land. March 19th looked like it would never happen. It happened April 10th, 1968. And then in Milwaukee, and that was the national Civil Rights Bill of 1968. In Milwaukee, a stronger, more inclusive law was passed April 30th with the votes of some new members of the Common Council. I like to use that poem, I like to use that example as an indication of hope. The fact that the energy that you put forth is not lost, even if what you want to happen doesn't happen as quickly as you would like it to happen. I think the best sermon I ever heard in my life, certainly one that I remember vividly, was given by Pastor Mick Roschke, a Lutheran pastor, whose text was, "Surely goodness and kindness will follow them." And he picked up on the word follow. Surely goodness and kindness will follow them all the days of their lives. And he said, notice that's follow. If you're moving forward, if you have your eyes on what you should have your eyes on, what you're doing, the work that you want to do in the world, you're not looking behind you. But that's where the results of your work are showing up. Surely goodness and kindness will follow you all the days of your life. Every once in a while we look behind like we are tonight and see that a great deal has been accomplished, but most of the time we long for that kind of insight. Someone once asked activist Bayard Rustin how he found the hope to go on with his work. Rustin was a conscientious objector during World War II and really the chief organizer of the 1963 March on Washington. He also organized and led the training sessions for the Voting Rights Project that I was part of in 1965. He experienced discrimination as a black man in white society, and then again in some black as well as white communities for being gay. He was asked how you find hope, and his response was along the lines of, you don't find hope, you make it. I think Rustin's thinking applies as well to peace. The Plowshare Center is among those who have made peace their mission. Thank you to all who have been involved in this wonderful organization. Thank you for making peace. Thank you for persevering for peace. Best wishes to you, to us, as we continue on for another 25 years.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Peggy also has, her books are available over at that table over there, and she'll be doing a book signing too if you wish. So thank you, Peggy.
Okay.
So, as you can well imagine, many people contributed time and talent to make this lovely evening possible. Would the members of the Gala Planning Committee and the Plowshare Center Board of Directors please stand? Don't be shy. So, I'd like to thank the Waukesha South High School Chamber Strings for the beautiful music, Michael and Jane Emile for the photo gallery, Sarah Allison for creating the beautiful invitations and programs and attending to, oh, so many details. Carroll University for the lovely venue, Carol Ann Kay for the beautiful centerpieces. By the way, those centerpieces are available for purchase, $30 if you'd like to purchase one this evening. Chef Mo for the delicious meal. Mary Whitticus and Mark Blackman for photography, capturing this evening for us. Thank you to the generous sponsors listed in the program: La Casa de Esperanza, Allison Art House, Berg Management, Bonnie Burke and Dave Helling, First Business Bank, Kate Delaney Jolin and Jim Jolin, Michelle Mader, Larry Nelson and Dawn Borowski, Waukesha State Bank, Carol Ann Kay, Crumrich's Jewelers, Rochester Deli, Sophia, and Thomas Press. Thank you all for joining us this evening to celebrate a quarter of a century of providing a fair trade marketplace for small farmers and artisans in economically developing countries and providing education for peace. We hope that when you're shopping for a gift for Mother's Day, Father's Day, weddings, graduations, birthdays, or something special for your home or yourself, that Plowshare is your first shopping stop. Because we believe that shopping fair trade is shopping with a conscience. You see, it's not about us. When you buy something at Plowshare, you're contributing through us, not to us. Through us to artisans in economically developing nations around the globe. Your purchases of unique handcrafted items make a difference in the lives of the families, of the artisans, and the communities in which they live. We are working towards economic justice through our fair trade shop. We have just completed working with a nonprofit consultant on a strategic plan that will launch us into the next 25 years. A few changes. The name of the entire organization will continue to be Plowshare Center, but we are changing the shop's name from Plowshare Gifts to Plowshare Fair Trade Marketplace, as we are much more than a gift shop. Another exciting initiative is setting up online sales. Okay. Well, there's a lot of exciting things coming up too. Peggy told you about her trip this summer that she's going to be leading, going to retrace the Freedom Rides. I've already signed up for the trip, and so has board member Michelle Mader. We would love to have more Plowshare friends join us on that trip. There are brochures at the table out front. Reverend Humphreys talked about a program that we're having just 10 days from now. Arno Michaelis, who was a white supremacist skinhead, wrote a book called My Life After Hate. He's partnered with Pardeep Kalika, whose father was murdered in the Sikh temple shooting. The two of them are working on a program called Serve to Unite, and they are doing a presentation for us in the Humphreys Chapel on March 31st at 6:30, and it's called Forgiveness, Transformation, and Peace. And there are also flyers about that on the table as well. We hope you'll join us in just 10 days again. Also, some of you have asked about our fashion show. We've had 3 fashion shows in a row in the springtime, but we're changing it up. This year we're going to have a fashion show in the fall, where we'll be able to highlight a totally different line of our fair trade clothing and accessories. So look for that in the fall. Silent auction items may be picked up and paid for over in that area. There's a table over there, and our Plowshare board members and committee members will assist you with that. Thank you for helping us celebrate our first quarter century. In all of Plowshare's work, we want to build hope and the skills for creating a culture of peace within ourselves, in our community, and in the wider world. Thank you all for being partners in peace. But you don't have to leave right now. Linger. Talk to friends. Enjoy each other's company. Thank you very much.